Welcome to Classic Mosaic Truth. I'm really glad you're joining us today. We're building a practical, modern exploration of everyday philosophy here. And the goal is simple, but, pretty profound, which is to help build a more resilient mindset for the real world. Now, before we get too far into the weeds, I want to gently remind you that this is not medical advice, and it certainly isn't therapy. Instead, think of this session as a practical, philosophical framework. It's something that may support your daily well-being and give you some tangible tools to navigate life with a little more clarity and a lot less unnecessary stress. If this episode helps you, please hit like and subscribe for the next one.
Absolutely. And for episode 8 today, we are jumping into Bertrand Russell's fascinating text, The Conquest of Happiness. Specifically, we're focusing on a psychological phenomenon we're calling the social trap.
Yeah, the social trap. It's such a great framing.
It really is. Our mission for this discussion is to clearly define, interrogate, and then systematically dismantle two major psychological hurdles that consistently rob us of peace. The first is what Russell terms persecution mania, and the second is the pervasive, almost suffocating fear of public opinion. On-screen text, overlay 1. The social trap explained.
And these two traps, they really work in tandem, don't they?
They do. They keep us incredibly anxious, constantly on the defensive, and worst of all, they convince us that we are merely reacting to a hostile world rather than actively constructing our own misery. So we're going to break them down, look at the very real, heavy costs they extract from our daily lives, and then build a clear, actionable exit path.
Russell's take on persecution mania is it's fascinating to me because he strips away the clinical paranoia and forces us to look at our own mundane narcissism. We've all done it, right? Assuming a completely neutral event is a targeted personal attack. But when I hear the phrase persecution mania, it still sounds pretty intense. How exactly does Russell frame this for the average, everyday person?
Right. It does sound like a severe diagnosis. But what's brilliant about Russell's approach is that he scales it down to the micro-interactions of everyday life. He's not talking about the clinical definition of paranoia where someone believes, the government has bugged their living room.
Right.
He's talking about the ego's subtle, persistent habit of interpreting the normal, random friction of the universe as a deliberate slight against you. It's that nagging feeling that your coworkers are gossiping about you the moment you leave the room, or that the person who cut you off in traffic did it specifically to disrespect you.
Oh, the traffic one is so real.
Exactly. It is the human ego spinning an elaborate, almost theatrical story of victimization out of entirely ordinary, meaningless circumstances.
The mundane narcissism of it all is what really gets me. He gives this brilliant, highly specific example in the text about public speaking. Imagine you're giving a speech at a public dinner. You deliver your remarks, you feel pretty good about your performance, and you go home. The next morning, you eagerly open the newspaper, and there are glossy pictures of all the other speakers, but your picture is completely missing.
Yes, and that exact moment is where the trap snaps shut. The psychological trap isn't the missing photo. The trap is the narrative you invent to explain the missing photo. On-screen text, overlay 2. Neutral events are not attacks.
You start spiraling.
You do. The person caught in the grip of everyday persecution mania will instantly assume that the editors held a secret meeting and deliberately conspired to ignore them. They'll tell themselves a story that the establishment fears their radical ideas or that their professional rivals sabotage the coverage. They cast themselves as the persecuted hero in a drama that doesn't actually exist.
When, in reality, the photographer probably just ran out of film, or the layout editor needed to cut exactly 1 inch of space to fit a shoe advertisement. It was just a cold, calculated editorial choice that has absolutely nothing to do with the speaker's worth. But the ego completely rejects that. It simply cannot accept that a random neutral event is just a random neutral event. It has to make it a targeted personal attack.
Because if it's a targeted attack, it means you matter.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The ego would much rather believe it is the central target of a grand, coordinated conspiracy than accept the incredibly humbling truth that it is just not the center of the universe. If the editors are out to get you, you must be important. That is the core mechanism of persecution mania, taking the random, thoughtless chaos of life and taking it incredibly deeply personally. It's a defense mechanism against our own relative insignificance.
Which leads us perfectly into the second part of this social trap, which is the fear of public opinion. If persecution mania is the delusion that everyone is constantly attacking you, the fear of public opinion is the absolute surrender to those imagined attackers. It's outsourcing your self-respect to the crowd. It's voluntarily submitting to the tyranny of what other people think, or at least what you assume they think.
It's a profound, tragic surrender of autonomy. Russell points out that people will actively, consciously modify their genuine tastes, their core values, and their natural impulses, simply to avoid the possibility of criticism or to fit seamlessly into the herd. On-screen text, overlay 3. Stop outsourcing your self-respect.
They just blend in.
They look around, take the temperature of the room, see what the majority currently approves of, and tailor their entire existence to match that arbitrary standard. And in the process, they completely abandon their authentic selves. They become a reflection of the crowd rather than a distinct individual.
But why do we do this? I mean, intellectually, we all know we shouldn't care what people think. Every self-help book tells us to be ourselves. So why do these traps grow so easily? Why is the pull of the herd so incredibly strong?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of human psychology, we can identify several deep-rooted causes. First, there's our fundamental insecurity coupled with intense self-focus. As we touched on earlier, we naturally treat ourselves as the main character of our own universe. We're experiencing life from the first-person perspective, so we are incredibly obsessed with our own narrative.
Right, we're the star of the movie.
Exactly. And the fatal error is that we project that internal obsession outward. We assume everyone else is equally obsessed with us. We feel like we're constantly standing under a spotlight, so we assume everyone in the audience is analyzing our every move.
And that feeling of being watched, of being constantly perceived, is magnified exponentially today. I mean, Russell was worried about the local newspapers and neighborhood gossip over the garden fence in the 1930s. But constantly carrying a device in your pocket that broadcasts a never-ending stream of judgment signals, that takes this to an entirely different universe of anxiety.
It really does.
Social media, a 24-hour news cycle, the endless connectivity, it means we are exposed to the opinions of the herd everywhere we go, all the time.
And that constant, unyielding exposure accelerates the next major root cause, which is comparison and status anxiety. When you're relentlessly bombarded with the highly curated, perfectly polished successes of others, you naturally begin to measure your own internal worth by those external metrics. You start looking for validation from the crowd, likes, comments, professional accolades to assure you that you're doing okay.
Outsourcing the self-respect again.
Precisely. The social trap goes monstrously large because we start relying entirely on external applause to secure our internal peace. And external applause is famously fickle.
And the final piece of this puzzle, which Russell points out, and which might just be the most humbling truth of all, is that we wildly, comically overestimate how much people actually think about us.
We truly do. The reality is that people are mostly thinking about themselves. They are worrying about their own problems, their own insecurities, their own relationships, and their own missing pictures in the newspaper. They simply do not have the cognitive bandwidth to obsess over your minor missteps.
It's kind of a relief when you think about it.
Recognizing that fact is a massive relief. It's liberating. But until you truly internalize it, the social trap just keeps tightening its grip.
Okay, so we're wandering around thinking everyone is out to get us and simultaneously terrified of what they think of us.
Yeah.
What happens when we stay caught in these traps? We need to look at the tangible toll this takes. The first major cost is the chronic physical tension. It is the exhausting mental and bodily burden of always being on the defensive.
Yes, the body absorbs all of it.
When you truly believe neutral events are attacks, your nervous system is constantly in a state of high alert, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. You are perpetually braced for an impact that usually never comes.
That chronic tension is incredibly draining. It depletes your energy reserves. And because you are so drained, so hypervigilant and fearful, the next inevitable cost is the shrinking of your life. The persistent fear of criticism fundamentally stunts personal growth. If you are terrified of standing out, of being judged or mocked, you will naturally conform to your immediate environment.
You just stop trying new things.
You stop taking risks. You stop expressing your genuine, unpolished ideas. By trying so desperately to perfectly blend in and avoid friction, you shrink your own potential. You end up living an oppressive, highly limited life, confined within boundaries drawn by people who aren't even paying attention to you.
We essentially build our own cages. And it becomes a life of performance over principle. This is the contrast Russell highlights so beautifully with his artist analogy. He talks about the difference between a genuine creator and someone just seeking applause. On-screen text, overlay 4. Performance versus inner principle.
That's a great section of the book.
A tree artist works from a deep, undeniable internal compulsion to express something real. They might want applause, eventually they're human after all, but the work itself comes first. The creation is driven by an inner truth. But a performer who is completely trapped by public opinion, they only create what they think the crowd will cheer for. They lose their inner compass entirely because they've handed it over to the audience.
That distinction between the artist and the performer is crucial for understanding this trap. When you live solely for the applause, you are entirely at the mercy of the audience, and audiences are notoriously capricious. If the crowd changes its mind or shifts its tastes, your entire foundation crumbles instantly. You have no inner citadel to retreat to because you built your entire identity on the shifting sands of public approval.
It's terrifying when you frame it like that.
The ultimate cost of the social trap isn't just anxiety, it's the total loss of your authentic self.
That is a remarkably heavy price to pay for the illusion of safety. So let's look at how Russell suggests we actually get out of our own way here, the exit path. He builds a pretty rigorous framework for breaking free from this, doesn't he?
He does, and the exit path requires highly deliberate, conscious practice. First, we must aggressively stop mind-reading motives. When someone does something that inconveniences or upsets us, our immediate defensive instinct is to assume malicious intent. Russell advises that we must strictly suspect our own motives before assuming the worst of others. We have to pause and ask ourselves, am I interpreting this action negatively because of my own vanity, my own insecurity, or my own bruised ego?
Catching that initial knee-jerk reaction before it spirals.
Exactly. And next, we have to rigidly separate facts from stories. The raw fact is the picture was not in the paper. The dramatic story is there is a grand industry-wide conspiracy to ruin my career. We have to train our minds to acknowledge what actually happened in objective reality and isolate it entirely from the ego-driven narrative we instantly invented to explain it.
Next on the exit path, you must consciously, intentionally choose your principles and values. You have to base your actions on deep internal impulses, on what you genuinely believe is right and true, not on the accidental temporary tastes of your neighbors or your peer group. You need a heavy internal anchor so you don't drift every time the social tide turns.
But he doesn't suggest we do this completely alone. It's not about becoming a total lone wolf and alienating everyone. The next step on the exit path is to build a small, trusted circle of honest feedback. Russell talks about finding congenial companions. You absolutely do not need the approval of the entire world or the entire internet, but having a few close people who truly respect your authentic self and give you honest, grounding feedback is incredibly protecting.
That is a vital point. We still need connection. And finally, perhaps the most powerful tool on the exit path is to practice what we can call calm independence. Russell uses a wonderful, vivid analogy here. Do you want to share the dog analogy?
Oh, it's brilliant. He points out that a dog will bark furiously and is much more likely to bite when it senses that you are afraid of it. It smells the fear and acts aggressively. But if you walk past that same dog with calm, unbothered indifference, the dog eventually loses interest and goes back to sleep. On-screen text overlay 5. Practice calm and quiet independence.
It's so true.
The human herd acts the exact same way. If you show fear, if you eagerly try to appease them or nervously defend yourself against every minor slight, they will push harder.
No.
If you show calm, quiet indifference to their unnecessary judgments, they will eventually leave you alone.
The dog analogy works beautifully for illustrating the emotional dynamic. But let's push back on that for a second because we need to set up some very clear guardrails here. In the modern workplace, for example, if you show complete calm indifference to your boss or your team, they might not just leave you alone like a sleepy dog. They might fire you. How does Russell account for power dynamics? And how do we ensure we aren't just using this philosophy as an excuse to be uncooperative?
That is exactly why the guardrails are so necessary. We want to ensure we're applying this philosophy in a way that is ethical, grounded, and actually functional in society. First, we have to recognize that independence is not arrogance. Walking your own principled path does not mean you get to look down on everyone else from a tower of supposed enlightenment. You are not superior just because you're trying to be independent.
Right. And the next guardrail is realizing that criticism is not always persecution. This is where the workplace example comes in. Sometimes feedback is literally just feedback. If someone points out a massive flaw in your quarterly report, they're not necessarily attacking your fundamental soul or plotting your downfall. We have to retain the humility and the professional maturity to hear constructive criticism without immediately sliding backwards into the persecution trap.
Exactly. Ignoring unnecessary psychological tyranny is different from ignoring necessary professional communication. Next, having strong principles is not the same as being pure, unyielding stubbornness. You have to remain open to reason and new information. If compelling new evidence presents itself, a truly principled person has the capacity to change their mind. A stubbornly ego-driven person refuses to adapt, simply to protect their pride.
And finally, the most important guardrail of all, you can be kind without being controlled. Detaching yourself from the suffocating tyranny of public opinion does not mean you have to become a cold, aloof, antisocial hermit. You can absolutely extend warmth, genuine generosity, and deep respect to others without ever letting their shifting opinions dictate your internal self-worth. On-screen text, overlay 6. Kindness without being controlled.
That is the ultimate goal, isn't it? Kindness without being controlled. You participate in society, you care for people, but you don't hand them the keys to your emotional stability.
So let's take these high-level philosophical concepts and apply them directly to everyday life. What does this actually look like in practice when we aren't just talking theory? Let's start with a standard work setting. Imagine a manager pulls you into an office and gives you feedback on a major project, pointing out a few core things that need to be completely rewritten.
Okay.
The trap of persecution mania is instantly interpreting that feedback as a brutal personal attack, convincing yourself the manager hates you, thinks you're incompetent, and wants you to fail.
Right. And the exit path in that exact scenario is taking a deep breath, mentally separating the raw facts from the dramatic story, and asking for objective clarity. The fact is, the project requires specific revisions. The story is, your career is over and your boss is out to get you. You have to consciously leave the story behind in your own head, and you respond calmly and professionally. You focus entirely on the work itself, on the task at hand, not on the imagined assault on your fragile ego.
Okay, what about our personal relationships? Say you're at home and your partner makes a slightly offhand, maybe careless comment about the way you loaded the dishwasher or how you organized the living room. The trap is instantly feeling deeply fundamentally judged, assuming they think you are a failure at life, and spiraling into a massive defensive argument over forks and plates.
In intimate relationships, the exit path is learning to name your emotional needs clearly and staying remarkably steady and kind. Instead of immediately attacking back or retreating into a passive-aggressive sulk, you simply say, "I'm feeling a little criticized right now. Can we talk about this differently?" You completely refuse to invent a tragic story that your partner is maliciously out to get you. You stay grounded in the principle of clear, honest communication rather than succumbing to the overwhelming fear of judgment.
Loading the dishwasher suboptimally isn't an indictment of my soul. I have to remind myself of that. And finally, let's look at our daily habits. The most common modern trap here is getting caught in the endless social media approval loop. You post a photo or an opinion, and you spend the next 3 hours constantly refreshing the notifications, letting the arbitrary number of likes entirely dictate whether you feel good about yourself that day. On-screen text overlay 7. Break the social approval loop.
The exit path for our digital habits involves deliberately and aggressively reducing your exposure to those synthetic judgment signals. You have to consciously step back from the metrics. Instead, you need to radically increase your real-life, physical actions that align with your actual deeply held values. Go do things that matter to you, even if no one will ever see them online. Read a book, build something, take a walk, break the exhausting cycle of endlessly performing for the faceless digital crowd.
Since we are so focused on practical application today, let's actually guide everyone through a brief, highly practical exercise. We call this the Social Freedom Reset.
Yes, I love this exercise. It is a simple, actionable tool that may support a much clearer mindset when you feel the walls of the social trap closing in on you. Wherever you are right now, I invite you to first just pause and soften the body. Take a real breath and intentionally release any physical tension you are tightly holding in your shoulders, your neck, or your jaw. Let the physical defensiveness completely melt away.
It is genuinely amazing how much physical tension we carry around all day when we secretly feel like we're constantly being judged.
It really is. The body keeps the score of all that anxiety. Next, I want you to clearly name what you think people are thinking about you right now. Say it out loud to the empty room or write it down on a piece of paper. Get the vague, shadowy fear out of the dark and into the light.
Name the fear to tame it.
Exactly. Next, take that specific thought and ruthlessly separate it into two clear, distinct categories: the raw facts you actually know to be true, and the dramatic, fictional stories you are vividly imagining in your head. Isolate the facts.
That separation process alone is so incredibly powerful. It just deflates the anxiety instantly.
Next, consciously choose one single principle you will act on today. What is a core value that truly matters to you, completely regardless of what anyone else on earth thinks? Next, choose one small, specific action you will take today that directly aligns with that principle, even if it is completely ignored and not applauded by anyone. Do something quiet, genuine, and purely for yourself.
Just for you.
Yes. Next, adopt one calm phrase to quietly repeat to yourself when the anxiety inevitably flares up later. The phrase is, I act from principle, not approval. Let that exact phrase be your heavy internal anchor. Finally, commit to one proof action today. Go do that small thing to physically anchor this new mindset into reality. On-screen text, overlay 8. Act from principle, not approval.
Act from principle, not approval. That is a fantastic grounding reset. Now, as people actually try to implement this philosophy in the messy real world, there are going to be some major stumbling blocks. Let's cover the common mistakes people make when trying to escape the social trap and how to actively fix them.
We have 5 big ones to cover here.
Right. Mistake one is overestimating our own merits and expecting universal, unending praise. We do a good piece of work and we secretly think the entire world owes us a ticker tape parade.
The fix for that grandiosity is maintaining a healthy, robust dose of realistic humility. You must accept that not everyone will appreciate your work or even notice it, and you must gracefully use that distinct lack of applause as an opportunity to focus purely, joyfully on the work itself. Let the act of doing the work be the only reward you actually need.
Mistake two is assuming others are obsessively deeply interested in us. We walk into a crowded room and instantly think everyone is secretly analyzing our outfit, our posture, or our career choices.
The fix here is a harsh but necessary reality check. You have to recognize that every single person in that room is the absolute center of their own universe. They simply are not thinking about you. They are anxiously thinking about their own outfits, their own posture, and their own careers. Let their natural self-absorption be your ultimate liberation.
Mistake three is a fascinating one to me. It is using deliberate, aggressive defiance to try and show everyone how independent you are. It's the person who purposely loudly does the exact opposite of whatever the crowd does, just to aggressively prove they don't care what the crowd thinks.
Yes, the professional contrarian. The fix there is understanding that aggressive, performative defiance is actually still a form of being heavily controlled by the crowd. If you are rebelling purely for the sake of rebelling, the crowd is still entirely dictating your behavior just in reverse. You want to aim for genuine, quiet indifference instead. Do what you genuinely love, whether the crowd happens to enthusiastically agree with it or completely despise it.
Mistake four is completely isolating yourself to avoid any possibility of criticism. You get tired of the judgment, so you just hide away from the world and stop trying.
The fix for that kind of fearful isolation is deliberate, curated connection. Do not hide and bunker. Instead, actively seek out that small, highly supportive group of congenial companions we talked about earlier. We are social creatures. We absolutely need community. We just do not need the crushing tyranny of the whole massive herd. Find the few specific people who truly understand and respect your inner principles.
And mistake five is secretly believing our own supposedly altruistic actions demand endless vocal gratitude from others. We do a favor for a friend, and we get quietly resentful if we do not get a handwritten thank you note and endless flowing praise.
The fix for that subtle resentment is to look very closely and honestly at your own underlying motives. You have to realize that true, pure generosity does not ever demand a performance of thanks. If you only do good things to get applause or to feel morally superior, it is not actually altruism. It is just an ego-driven transaction. True principles simply do not require external validation to be worthwhile. On-screen text overlay 9. Embrace genuine, calm indifference.
Okay, let's pull all these massive concepts together. We have covered a tremendous amount of philosophical ground in this session. Here's a quick, practical recap of our journey today. First, we clearly defined the twin social traps of everyday persecution mania and the suffocating fear of public opinion. Next, we identified exactly how deep insecurity and constant modern judgment exposure relentlessly fuel these exact traps.
Then, we recognize the incredibly heavy, tangible cost of living a defensive, physically tense, and permanently shrunken life. After that, we mapped a clear, actionable exit path that strictly separates raw, objective facts from imagined, dramatic stories.
We also established highly necessary healthy guardrails to ensure we remain warm and kind while becoming fiercely independent. Next, we practically applied these exact concepts to our work environments, our intimate relationships, and our modern digital habits.
And finally, we practiced the social freedom reset to physically and mentally anchor our inner principles.
That is a remarkably solid, comprehensive foundation. The ultimate goal here is absolutely not to become completely unfeeling, cold, or detached from humanity. The goal is to become wonderfully unshakable in your own core values. And that internal stability sets us up perfectly for exactly where we're going next.
Yes, in our next conversation on Russell's philosophy, episode 9, We will ask the vital question: is happiness still possible? Plain joy versus fancy joy. We will look closely at how we completely overcomplicate our own contentment and discuss how to find our way back to simpler, much more profound satisfaction. On screen text overlay 10. Thanks for joining us today.
I am really genuinely looking forward to that conversation. It is going to be incredibly insightful, especially after dealing with all this heavy ego stuff today. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to chew on. If we truly entirely manage to stop caring what the crowd thinks, do we run the risk of losing the very social friction that makes us better, more empathetic human beings? Where exactly is the fine line between healthy, stoic indifference and dangerous, unchecked narcissism? Think deeply about that the next time you find yourself entirely dismissing someone else's critique. Thanks for being here. If you want the full series, check the playlist and please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Support line 1 included verbatim. Pass. Support line 2 included verbatim. Pass. No timestamps or digits included. Pass. Total length matches target range. Pass.